Good morning. I want to start in kind of an unusual place this morning. I want to invite you. We're going to go on a little imaginary journey. So I want to invite you to close your eyes. We'll begin in this place with our eyes closed. And I can see those of you who are cheating right now. So let's take a little in breath here. Just breathe in, breathe out. And in your imagination, breathe in the air in this little park, in this little part of Grand Haven. Take a breath in and breathe in the air and the sky in this particular part of the world. And as you take another breath in, imagine you're breathing in the breath of trees, these trees that are changing, the maple and the ash and the elm and the walnut and the oak. Breathe again. Breathe in again. Breathe in the sky and the tree breath, and if you can, in your imagination, sort of lift yourself up off the ground and try to imagine in a larger space. Where are we right now? Maybe you can see the Grand River making its way out to the lake, and maybe you can see the shoreline, and maybe you can see the dune grass, and you're breathing in this. You're breathing in the river, you're breathing in the dune grass, and you're breathing in the shoreline, this place between this massive body of fresh water and these pristine beaches. Maybe in your imagination you could go even higher, and you begin to see this entire sort of West Michigan area, and you can see all these different rivers and tributaries and lakes, all in this kind of cooperative relationship with this larger lake, and you're breathing in these tributaries and rivers and shorelines. And in your imagination, go even higher if you can. And let's say you can see the entire Great Lakes basin, this entire bioregion. And maybe for the first time, you don't actually see it as 5 lakes or Lake Michigan. You can see the whole thing is just one body. And you're breathing in this, the sky, and you're breathing in the water, and you're breathing in this basin, and you're breathing in this part of the world. And in your imagination, I want you to come back down. Come back down to West Michigan and to the shoreline and to the dune grass and to the river and back into this building and into your chair. And now let's go the other way and feel your feet on the concrete here. And what's beneath the concrete, and what is this building resting on? And maybe you find yourself on the land now, on this initial crust of the earth, this topsoil and the grass. And imagine that your feet are now being rooted in the earth, and they're making their way down. Your feet are making their way down like a tree makes roots. And you're just now beneath the topsoil, and you begin to draw up nutrients from the earth itself, just as you were breathing in the sky and the trees. Now you're taking in the nutrients of the earth, and your feet go down even lower into the sand, into this sand that filters out the rainwater and even the toxins that we dump on the top of the soil. And you're sinking down beneath this thick layer of sand, and you're finding the little fissures in the rocks, and your feet are growing these roots down even further, and you begin to touch these little tributaries and streams and even rivers, and you're drawing up nutrients from the earth itself as if you're breathing in and out the sky, and through your feet you're drawing up the nutrients of the earth. And now take the journey back, and you're leaving these underground rivers and streams, and you're coming up through the sand and the topsoil, and you're back into your chair. And I'll invite you now to listen to this poem by William Stafford. He says, "Be a person here. Be a person here. Stand by the river. Invoke the owls. invoke winter and then spring. Let any season that wants to come make its own call. After that sound goes away, the sound of the call of that season, wait. A slow bubble rises through the earth and begins to include sky, stars, all space, even the outracing, expanding thought. Come back and hear the little sound again. Suddenly, this dream you are having matches everyone's dream. And the result is the world, as if the earth is dreaming itself. If a different call came, there wouldn't be any world, or you, or the river, or the owls calling. How you stand here is important. How you listen for the next things to happen, how you breathe. I invite you to open your eyes and be here in this place with these people. In some ways, I wanted to begin breathing in and out the sky in our imagination because that's what's happening all the time. And I wanted us to imaginatively draw up the nutrients of the soil because that's what happened when you made your breakfast this morning. This intimate participation with all things. And I wanted to start here because I don't know what your week has been like, but it's been, for me, a destabilizing and kind of dark week. Would you agree? You wonder, what is going on? What is going on with our relationships with one another and with the earth and with all things? When is this power dynamic that seems to control the human mind, the human ego, going to give way to something larger and richer and more connected and more intimately interwoven in all things? We live with this kind of subject-object power over everything. Men, power over women, and human beings, power over the earth, as if it's ours. I own this, my sky, my land, so forth and so on. And William Stafford is right. How you stand here is important. How you stand here in this place. How you sit here is important. And I wanted to do a little talk today about the seasons. Because, like David was saying at the beginning, you wake up and you're like, something is different, correct? Some switch was flipped that we all knew was coming, but we feel it in the body. And something shifts, and it reminds us, really, of the impermanence of all things. I loved the meditation. Fall tends to have a little grief in there as much as there is beauty. And of course, grief and love are holding hands. Like two lovers walking down the sidewalk, walking out onto Lake Michigan. Yeah, and fall seems to have that kind of like potency to it. So today is dedicated to the fall and to the shifting of things. And I keep thinking about Rilke, which was the inspiration for this entire year. He says, if we but surrender to Earth's intelligence, we could rise up rooted like trees. And of course, I want to ask, what does that mean? What are you talking about? Surrender to Earth's intelligence. What does that look like? What does that feel like in the body? And does the Earth have intelligence in the first place? And I know maybe if you're more scientifically minded, you might be thinking, well, it doesn't have like what we would call human intelligence, but it definitely seems to be doing whatever it is that it's doing without you. So it has a kind of intelligence. And it has a kind of self-regulating, cyclical turning over of things of which you're not in control. And how do you know that? Because you woke up over the last few days and you said, it's freaking cold, and I didn't sign up for this. And where did I put my jacket? Even though you can get in your car like today and turn on the seat heater, which I did, and so like my ass is warm, but it's artificial, you know? Certainly not surrendering to Earth's intelligence. I'm like, no way am I going to surrender this morning on the drive. So what is Rilke talking about? And I am thinking in the most cosmic terms. We are at the threshold of possibility as human beings to enter into a much more ecocentric consciousness. What that looks like, I don't know. All I know is that we're at the threshold. And we can dig in our heels and say, we're not going there, and we're going to continue to dominate the earth and anyone else that we subjugate, even people of the opposite gender, meaning women, in this sense, in light of the news. And I'm going to do what I have the power to do, or we're going to sink into a much larger kind of intelligence, is what Rilke would call it, much more expansive and ecocentric consciousness, world-centric and ecocentric consciousness, that we are, in fact, participants in this great drama or dream of the earth. So I just got back from Bear's Ears, which is sort of like being in a dream itself. There are still places in this country that are as wild as they were before even the indigenous people got here. There are wild canyons that have been shaped by wind and rain and snow and sleet that still stand as they did 30,000 years ago. And in some cases much older than that. So I just got back from this landscape at a very amazing time, the equinox and the full moon. And there were times in the middle of the night where it seemed like daylight. I don't know if any of you woke up during the full moon. I had the privilege of sleeping outside without a tent. So it was this kind of dream landscape. And this is the earth. This is not a movie. This is not something I paid $9 for and was taken away. The earth itself doing its thing. And we're beginning that turn where the days are getting shorter and the light is less. And now, of course, the clouds are here to stay until May. And we can feel this shift even if our body does not, or even if our minds aren't wanting to get on board with it, our body is in tune with these changes. So anyway, I was in Bear's Ears, and Bear's Ears is a really amazing place. Of course, it's under threat now again from the Trump administration. And when these wild places are gone, they're, as they are in their pristine, self-regulated beauty, they're gone. Of course, the earth has its own sense of time, and what will it be like in 100 million years? I don't know. But in terms of our sense of scale and time, when we mess them up and drill into them with these shafts, extracting and taking whatever we want, and you can hear that, there may be some innuendos in there too, about the way we've been on the earth. It's gone forever. So anyway, I was in this place, and Bear's Ears, where I was about 8,000, 9,000 feet. And where we started, and then we made our way down to this canyon, and we're in this canyon for 7 days, and then climbed our way back out. Really amazing. And the amazing thing about southern Utah is you go through all these climate zones all in a very short amount of time. So at the very top, you have the aspens turning, and you have certain kinds of pine trees and firs. You have oaks and maples. And as you make your way down into the canyon, the landscape begins to change, and you have junipers, and you have sage. They're not trees, but sage bushes. And all these different climate zones, and there's very little water in Utah, especially the last couple of years, severe drought out west, as you know. But all these sort of delicate and wild climate zones on the way down. It's a place where mountain lion is still doing whatever it is that mountain lion does, and bears. And when I would go to pump water, and I went to pump water a couple different places because there's a little stream. You could actually drink the water, but I wanted to also sometimes I want to not spend my entire time using the bathroom outside. So I was filtering my water. And in the place where I went to filter water, I came back down in the morning, and there were these nice little bear prints just along the stream. So you definitely feel it's a humbling place to be. I'm a visitor in a sense in this wild place. But anyway, so I came back from this kind of magical time in a way. And it's also an archaeological area. So you have the Pueblo people, and then there was a people before them, which actually no one has a name. It's named after the archaeologists, which I think is funny. Oh, they're my people. But anyway, you had these people who lived in these canyons. Well, the Pueblo people, that was about 800 years ago, and then the other people group was more than 1,000, 1,500 years ago. And you can still see remnants. You can see these little mounds. You can see little cliff dwellings here or there. But largely these were people who lived in, as far as we can tell, in a kind of cooperative relationship with the land. And yes, they marked up the land. They did. You can see their houses. You can see how they participated with the land. But it's not exactly a toxic footprint. I don't know what they would have, if they would have had plastic and oil and what kind of mark they would have left. I don't know. But it does make you wonder if in 1,000 years people come to wherever it is that we've been living, what are they going to find? What is it that they're going to find in the ground, on the earth, in our mounds? What's the topsoil going to be like? What's the water going to taste like? All these kinds of things. It sort of puts you into a place. Well, it helped me realize just in a way how dominant our presence is on the earth, especially when you're in places where the footprint is still light. I thought about these ravens flying around. And I thought to myself, their ancestors have probably, in some way, shape, or form, only ever lived in this canyon. This is a vast area, by the way, where I was. They don't know that their cousins, 100, 200, 500 miles from them, eat trash. They've never known what trash tastes like, these particular ravens in this canyon. But sort of their cousins, they pick through our trash to eat, to survive. So we live in this sort of precarious time. And I was thinking about trees in general because, of course, like these kids, I was glad to do the kids talk, whatever that was. What did they notice right away? Trees. And the sense of change that's upon it. And apparently some kids knew much more than I did about how trees actually work. And I was thinking about coniferous trees, which are the, non-pine trees. And they are... Wait, conifers are pine trees. Deciduous trees lose their leaves. I was thinking about this incorrectly. Shouldn't have tried to sound fancy anyway. I was thinking about those trees where leaves fall, those ones. Yeah. All right. If we but surrender to Earth's intelligence, not my own, could rise up rooted. But anyway, the ones that lose their leaves developed 100 million years ago. Seems like a long time. This summer they found a jawbone of a Homo sapien in Israel. It was 200,000 years old. That's pretty old. But the trees that drop their leaves, 100 million years. And the ones that don't drop their leaves, whatever they're called, 270 million years old. So a kind of intelligence and a kind of cooperative existence for a lot longer than Homo sapiens have been wandering around, making dwellings and thinking they were kings of the earth. Correct? So these trees, of course, have a kind of intelligence. And we started with the kids. They store energy. And they are actually a little like bears. right now, collecting what they can, storing a layer of energy to make it through the winter. Why do they need to do that? Because I don't know if you've noticed, but the wind blows quite strongly in the winter, and there's something, white things that fall from the sky, and all that weight, a tree can't handle it. So in just a very simple sense, just to make it through the winter, it has to release these leaves and live off this stored energy. Here's something else I learned about these amazing trees. The more brightly colored the trees are, the healthier they are, typically. Some of that can depend on rainfall, but typically the more brightly colored the trees are, the healthier they are, and they have a greater capacity to produce toxins, to keep out aphids and other kinds of little insects. And guess who knows this? The aphids. And they will see brightly colored trees and say, I don't want to try to set up shop there for the winter. I'm going to go to the weaker ones. That's what I mean by Earth's intelligence. Did you think that up? Did anyone consult you? What IQ, dreamed up such a thing? And here we are as just cooperative participants in the dance of nature itself. The releasing of something. Even trees sleep. In fact, if you take an oak tree and put it inside, it will die. You want to know why? It will die of sleep deprivation. Because it has to sleep. How does it sleep? It sleeps when it no longer produces leaves and sleeps during the winter. That's what I'd like to do. Wake up in the spring. So this is part of what I mean by Earth's intelligence that's sort of all around us. And what language is it speaking? I'm not necessarily saying what is it saying to you. Sometimes nature can be like that. You can have a sense for things, and it might mirror back to you, reflect back to you something about your own life, like change your life, or encourage you to do this or that, or you might hear something in the wind, but it's also just speaking its own language. It's not consulting you. What is the language of trees? What's the language of the river? Or the language of the dune grasses? Or the language of Lake Michigan? Or the language of the waves? Or the language of the shoreline? Wait till it's transformed in February to Mars. This lunar landscape. What kind of intelligence is happening, and what language is it speaking? And how can we as human beings listen? That was the invitation of the meditation, and also the invitation of Stafford's poem here. To stand by the river, to invoke the owls, and to let whatever season be whatever season it is, and then to listen. To put your ear to the wind, like the elk in that story. And what is it saying? And what is it teaching us about how to be in the world? Because it's pretty obvious that we can see our destructive patterns. Maybe for the first time ever in the 21st century, we're seeing just how destructive our patterns and habits are for one another and also for the earth. In fact, in the pre-talk thing, it was brought up sort of this ethical imperative that crosses religious and spiritual traditions. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which seems to be a kind of ethical imperative in a lot of spiritualities. The question now is, how far out does that extend? Who's the other? Do unto others, that'd be nice if we could just get there between genders. Right? And this is like a moral emergency we're having. But it's the beginning of a moral emergency. Do you think if people in power, do you think if men in power are going to mistreat women, they're going to treat the earth well? Talk about an object. So the great invitation is not for this moral imperative to go away, like, oh, we don't need that old spiritual stuff, but for it to expand. To who else does it include? What else does it include? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And now we know, more than ever, this is not, spiritual mumbo jumbo. We know that whatever we do on the earth will come back to haunt us. Or just come back around the cycle again, correct? That's what we call karma. or as Jesus says, by the measure you use, it will be measured to you. It will come back. And now we know this. So it's a kind of, yes, it's a moral emergency, but it's also a great invitation. In fact, something I've been noticing, and something about autumn reminds me of this, is that there are two meta myths, two categories of meta myths. One is the journey, and actually I did a whole thing on the hero's journey. Do you remember that? Most of you were here for that. I was here for it. And that takes up a lot of the stories of ancient myths, but that's only one half. You know what the other half is dedicated to? The life, death, life cycle of all things. Now we kind of like, especially in the Western world, a little more of the hero's journey because we can, go through life and do things. The life, death, life cycle is much more humiliating and humbling. Here it comes round again. Here it comes round again. And fall actually feels more like that. Nobody conquers fall, I went out there and conquered fall. It doesn't even make any sense. It's actually something you surrender to. You're like, summer's over. Dang. And you fall into it. It's that life, death, life cycle. And of course, there are some pretty awesome myths. I won't get into them all, but I was thinking of Demeter and Persephone. Demeter is one of the three earth goddesses, and she's the goddess of harvest and corn and everything that comes from the earth. That's Demeter. And as you know, or maybe you don't know, but Demeter's daughter, Persephone, is captured by Hades and taken down into the underworld. And then Demeter goes around grieving. She changes herself into an old person and just like wanders around the earth, and a family takes her in, and eventually she's able to reveal herself as a goddess, and she's talking about her particular grief, and she makes a deal. And now I'm telling you too much of the story. And basically the deal is Persephone can come out of the underworld for only half the year. And half the year they can be reunited mother and daughter, and the other half of the year she has to go in the underground. And there's a kind of grief that happens with that. Now there's a lot going on in that story on the psychospiritual human side, but just on the level of nature, it was one way of saying, this is what happens. You can't have it all. You can't have 72 degrees and blazing sunlight all the time. You can't, even if there's this other place called Florida. That it's just the way it is. It's the way the earth is. And to surrender to earth's intelligence is to be more fully human, really. Not to be less human, but more fully human. And with that comes some grief. I'm not in charge, and I'm going to die like all things. So these are some of the... Actually, I was thinking about, well, I haven't looked at the calendar, but the big Jewish festivals are coming. Sukkot. They just happen? All right, so thank you. But Sukkot is the fall festival. And there's all kinds of other stuff with the Jewish Exodus story where they live in booths or tents for 8 days and they eat outside. What a fantastic thing to do, to make yourself eat outside for 8 days. Just to remind you that you are a person who lives outside. And everything that you dine on comes from the outside world. But the underpinnings of that entire festival are just the harvest itself. And turning in a sacred way, saying, I live on the death of all things. It's true. Like maybe you've heard Joseph Campbell say, oh, so you're a vegetarian? Haven't you heard the carrot screaming? Yeah. And built into the great religions who have still some connection with the earth cycles is every year it's turning just the dining together with other human beings into a sacred act. It's there. Of course, the indigenous people are most well known for this cooperative and sacred relationship with the life, death, life cycle of all things. And everything they eat and consume has a sacred quality to it. I say we need more of that, not less. Even if you're not particularly religious or you're an atheist, I'm talking about a sacred cooperation with the fact that you don't sustain yourself. That's the invitation. That's the life, death, life cycle invitation. I think fall is like once a year a reminder, hey, you're going to die like the leaves. And to surrender to such intelligence, I think, is part of the invitation. Meanwhile, Um, I was thinking about how, I mean, this is like a bit telling, and I don't even want to tell you, but I get kind of excited in the fall because Starbucks comes out with like its fall line of drinks, you know? I'm not going to tell you which one I get. But it's funny that the reason why that works is because really, beneath our little Western clothes is an earth psyche. It's there. You are the earth. You're not something other than the earth. And all of the evolutionary information that went into bringing you into existence is rooted in this cycle. And something in our bodies gets triggered when autumn turns around, and Starbucks is smarter than we are, and they thought, we can make money from this. And actually, a lot of our holidays are rooted in that same kind of thing. We feel it in our body, and they say, we know what you should do, not surrender to Earth's intelligence, but to the pumpkin spice latte. Surrender to that, okay? You'll feel good for like 20 minutes, and then you'll crash. So, I have no idea why I brought that up, just kind of an aside. Other than I sense the invitation of autumn is the surrender to the life-death-life cycle. Life-death-life cycle. What is it saying? What is it speaking? And more than that, my sort of image for the day is that everything is a seed. Everything is a seed. Everything is a seed. You will seed the earth one day with your decomposing body. It's true. You are a seed. And everything is a seed, including stuff we don't like to think about, like our waste, like our trash, like our plastic. It's a seed in this sense. You put it into the earth, and it's going to do something. The question is, what will it do? Right? Everything you do, everything is a seed. And I think that's the great invitation of the fall. How might you live your life? As if it were a seed, as if everything, and I mean even things that come out of your mouth, is a seed. How you vote is a seed. Who's in charge is a seed. Who's not in charge is also a seed. They come back around. By the measure you use, it will be measured to you. And sort of how do we begin to bring our attention to this reality that everything comes back around? Our stories and myths, our carbon footprint. By the way, this is just like a random thought that occurred to me this morning, which is one reason why you're here and we are here as a species is because the earth, I'm not saying it did this on purpose, but that the earth figured out a way to store carbon. It's true. It figured out a way to store it in coal and all kinds of other things. And enough of it was contained and stored for us to have the kind of atmosphere that makes it possible for life as we know it. So when we use carbon, we are using how the earth figured out its intelligence to bring life as we know it on the earth. Do you get what I'm saying? Okay. So you have a footprint. And how we use it, we know already is having an effect on the climate, on the earth, on the winds and the rains and the oceans. We know that. And the great invitation of the 21st century is, are we going to bring some greater consciousness to this or not? Or are we going to have this kind of mentality, I'm going to get all I can while I can, because who cares? Maybe Jesus will fix it all in the end, or some other religious version of an apocalyptic swooping in, which fall reminds us of. That everything is the life-death-life cycle. It doesn't end, in other words. So anyway, everything is a seed. What am I seeding in the earth? What am I leaving behind? I really mean that in a simple sense. It's funny when you spend 7 days backpacking, because everything you bring in, you have to bring out. And I had to bring out all the trash. And I brought very few things, but I still came out with a plastic bag full of other kinds of plastic trash, which I then went and threw away, or tried to recycle. There it is. And that's just 1 week of me being like super green, you know? And really, because I didn't want to carry it on my back, because I'm getting old, I'm looking at these, but how do I live every single day if everything is a seed? And we know this, but one part of us doesn't want to know very much about this. What are we gathering up and what effect is it having? I have a box in the basement that I haven't opened since 2003. I can't even remember what's in there. Probably some pictures. I saw some pictures recently, and of people I didn't recognize, and the feeling was, in a couple generations, if anyone finds my photos, they're gonna be like, "Who's this dude?" I think maybe I was related. I don't know. Maybe that was just a friend. Gone. All this precious stuff. My wife read me part of an article by Parker Palmer. He's got a new collection of essays on aging. And not that I'm suggesting that. I'm just saying. And anyway, he talks about the pretty natural tendency that people have when they get to a certain age to start cleaning out their basement. Like my box I haven't looked at since 2003. And but he also says, but what many people are not willing to do is clean out their psychological basement. Because everything is a seed. How you speak, how you act, your hang-ups, your consciousness, your awareness, your myths, your stories, how you treat one another, and all the stuff that you've collected that you don't know what to do with. Everything is a seed in this life-death life cycle of all things. So very simply, what are you seeding? So as the light fades and the days shorten, and as you draw in the energies of summer, it was a good summer, I felt. You draw in the energies of summer and prepare like the trees to descend into the darkness of the next few months. What is the earth saying? What if you went out this week and listened to Earth's intelligence? What is it saying? What is it speaking? Can you hear it? What do you hear in the wind? Maybe if we could better learn to speak and listen to the native language of the fall, we would better understand the rich and humbling beauty of the life-death life cycle. Because as William Stafford says, be a person here. Be a person here. How you stand here is important. How you listen for the next thing to happen. How you breathe. Thanks for listening.